I'm going to get off your screen, Brother Crumpler.
Thank you so much, Senator Barr.
The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. A show for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Oba Tashaka and his guests are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Oba Tashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Oba Tashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Greetings to all of the viewers, the family of this show. I want to thank those viewers who have made donations. This show has been costly. That's been helpful. For viewers, as Brother Ogawa noted, hit the red button to subscribe and the like button if you like the show. Today's show is a very special show. We've been doing shows now 5 years, and we've had some very interesting people come on the show. But this one is in a very special category. You've often heard me say that African American culture is the popular culture of the United States and the world. It's also the classical culture of the United States and the world. And for those who have a culture that's been shaped in the reality they live in, like, say, Native Americans, then they've shaped a culture and an art form suited to that reality. The only thing original about European American culture and the art form is it's not original. It's an import from Europe. And so when we talk about this culture, African American culture, it's a culture that draws from Africa, but has been shaped in this country, and it is the culture that drives the world. So this is a special occasion because in the culture, the highest form of the culture is the art form. That's the highest form. That's where the greatest beauty exists. That's where the deepest thought exists. Think of Dizzy Gillespie and jazz, or Bird, or others. Think of the depth to which they've gone. They're comparable to Malcolm, but Malcolm drew a lot of his depth from them. So the art form of African American culture is the peak. It's the highest level of the culture. And the reason why this is such an honor to have on this show a grandmaster in the portrayal of the show, I had him listed as master, but technically he's a grandmaster, which is the highest level of mastery in African systems and in African American systems. And we are honored today to have a grandmaster of art, professor emeritus of art, a community artist whose art is all over the Black community in sizes so big you have to be there to see him. This is a master artist whose art captures what in Dogon astrophysics is called the Duno-So. So, word, a Duno universe. And you know I've gone through this before. A Duno-So is unlike European thinking that's linear, 1, 2, 3, 4. A Duno-So captures the whole of a part. We are all miniature universes of the larger universe. The grand masters capture the whole of the part, and then what they end up doing is moving on and capturing other wholes. And that's Grandmaster Dewey Crumpler. I've known Dewey for many, many years. He's a brother of another mother. This is a brother who's 10 years younger than me, and I've seen him grow. I've seen him move around the Black community. I was proud to have him on the faculty at San Francisco State when we went through to the highest stage of the discipline, and Dewey Crumpler was key in that. He's helped me in my growth, and we'll talk about that later on. So Dewey and everyone watching this, this is a profound honor and pleasure to have a brother of your good character, because one of the qualities of a good artist or a good anything is that you're a good person, because you can't reflect beauty unless you have beauty inside of you. And you surely got that. And so, and I know there's a lot of people that contribute to that, and we'll talk about that later. So this is an honor to have you on this show. It's going to be an honor for people to hear what you have to say and to dialogue with you. Welcome, Grandmaster, Professor Emeritus, Dewey Crumpler.
Well, let me just say that I feel unworthy, but I know that you do not tread lightly. You are one of the most serious people that I have had the great honor to meet, and I've met many great people. So to hear those words come from you humble me. And I should say that along the way, you have definitely been one of my inspirations. From the moment I stepped foot on the campus, but even before that, when I was going to protests as a little kid at the Sheraton Palace, where Dick Gregory and others were marching to make present the African continuum in those individuals, like my godmother, who worked cleaning hotel bedrooms, and people like you were fighting the good fight, from that Sheraton Palace incident to the Cadillac place on Van Ness. you have been a warrior and an example. And I have attempted to follow those examples and to live up to their extraordinary insight and profound love of the people of other mothers that are all one. And you know, the one is the point, a small one in our micro reality, but one that encompasses the universe as one force. And as you said, the creative impulse tries to tap in to all of that energy. And so I'm more than honored to be on your show. I've been watching it for all the years that it has been, because I know you so well. And finally, although there is no end, having had you provide for me the first real opportunity to teach in a university setting after I received my degrees. And I can only say to Shaka, thank you, my brother. And I am honored to be on your show. Let me just say that the work that I am going to share with the great people watching your show is work that comes at a kind of midpoint in my career. I'm not going all the way back to the beginning because this is a point that brings us to, I think, the clearest focus. And that was where my work wound up in the 1990s. And it is at that point that I am concentrating on today, because that developed out of an intense study over 40 years, 30 years, I should say, of my life. At that point, I was in my 40s, and that's a very important point in a human's trajectory. And the previous experiences, including those that we passed by each other and became friends, had begun to synthesize. I was born at the midsection of the 20th century, and I was born in part in the results of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th. And I say that because any century that terminates at one point continues into the next one. Just as we have come out of the 20th century, the 20th century has shaped, along with that 19th, our present condition. And therefore, the 20th century is still among us. But you can feel from the rupture that is beginning at the sort of first quarter of the 21st century, which is when the previous century starts to lose some of its energy, because the next century is grabbing for its own identity. And that, like the universe itself, creates rupture so that change can take place. And we are in the midst of change, just as when I came into the world, the consciousness of Black people now at the end point of colonialism had expressed itself dynamically to become the fullness of itself. And through that first 10 years after the Second World War, African thought began to clarify itself, to identify its oppressor as a human being, because many Africans participated, peoples participated in the Second World War. And you know, in any power force, the first thing you want to make certain, if you are a power force, is that your maintenance is not disturbed and you still control the brain of your subject. But after World War II, that subject saw clearly that the monster bleeds. And once you know that the monster bleeds, just like Toto going behind that curtain and pulling it off of the wizard, that context now is change. And that's what Africans brought to the 20th century, just like the atomic bomb changed the world. African consciousness changed the 20th century. In the arts, Europe's encounter with Africa at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th dynamically shifted the consciousness of artists. Because even though Africans were subjects, the force of their cultural power, and as Tushaka laid out, one of the highest forms of human consciousness is what they put into the world creatively, whether that is in the sciences, whether that is in the auditory musical context, or whether that is in weapons of war, hard power. That's the element that keeps us conditioned, and the arts are essential in that conditioning. And so I became, as a product of the first half or second half of the 20th century, born in apartheid and living in apartheid as a youth until I was about 12 years old, when I heard Malcolm say something that had a deep impression on me. And that was, we left our minds in Africa. And I tried to understand, what did he mean? Because as you know, Tushaka, in the 1950s, when I was growing up, if you called a Black person Black, you had to go to war. Your highest insult was to call a Black person an African, because all you saw on the weekend on television and comics and cartoons were these Ubangi looking things, as they were called, roasting white people, and a white man swinging across the screen in the deepest, darkest Conradian jungles. These perceptions had been indelibly implanted in the Black mind for the single purpose of maintaining the lie that their hard power reinforced. Now, they use the arts to do that, because all of these frameworks came out of the creative mind that was paid to do the work of the power brokers of the culture, because the culture was shaped to move in a certain thrust. And it's in that context that I became interested as a kid who drew pictures in classrooms, who won contests at school, and who was seen in some ways as a freak because you had these creative proclivities that made you seem odd, because you were always doing things in awkward ways. But in all cultures, the elders and those priests pay attention to youth. And I began to learn these things because I spent all of my energy trying to figure out, as a young adolescent coming into myself, what Malcolm meant. Why was Africa something he thought we lost? Because I was told it was a vicious, frightening place of no history. No history. A people absent of presence. No presence in absence. This, the people that I would come to understand are the oldest inhabitants of the planet, who extend back through time and space. And the more I learned about Africa, the more this revealed itself. The more I was learning about Europe, and I was learning a great deal because I took art serious as a heart attack, as my parents used to say. I took it seriously and I studied it deeply. I spent every weekend in a museum. I went there and drew pictures of what I saw. I read books deep into the night, studying Michelangelo's drawings, or Leonardo da Vinci's scientific explorations in creativity. So this is what shaped me to want to communicate creatively. And And so, in this context, I began to make murals and other things that you pointed out went on the walls. I was engaged in the 60s in following the Black Panthers and drawing pictures of them and working with Black Panthers, trying to empower the neighborhood with images that were opposite from those psychotic frameworks that were bombarding us on the television and in newspapers in the 1960s. And so, as Malcolm argued, you should be doing something for your community, about your community, to uplift your community. And that energy was pervasive in the 1960s. Blacks had created a musical force again, whose very energy empowered the landscape by the vibrations it sent out. The use taught to us by slaves to use innuendo because they couldn't speak directly, openly. They used music and rhythms and ways of split talking in order to create a language that they spoke among themselves, so pervasive, so extraordinary, so articulate was it, that it ultimately came to reshape the country that the very psychotics that had shaped the framework, that even in its vicious shaping, the cultural framework that Black people created even brought their boots to shaking, so that out of our expression, they found a new expression that was called country music, because those blues forms that they heard, they enveloped in their own European folk music. And that music shaped the language of America. That's because the hated, as the most ancient people on earth, had the inner psychic capacity to blow out psychosis through the vibrations they created. Now, when I say vibrations, I want to be clear that I mean when you are shaped as a kid inside those churches, that sacred space, you hear around you an energy field that when your parents are in this church stomping, and that stomp gets from the ground through your feet into your legs, up to your heart, and the very rhythm of the blood moving through your body is animated in that rhythm. And so you go into this sacred house, and it creates an energy field that you yourself, through those very vibrations, are being reborn, restructured, so that you can deal with the evil that's outside of that house for another week. That took an extraordinary understanding of human psyche and human capacity for African people to bring that energy across the ocean and into the environment that they energized. And energy operates and it never quits pulsating. So even energy that's hundreds of years old is still operative in this place. And that's why African thinkers often tap into it, because the conditions have trained them to tap into it. Take, for example, Sylvia Hartman, who is trying to do something called fabulation, to become so deeply embedded in the psyche of her ancestors that she didn't even know, by looking at photographs of them. This artistic product, looking at photographs, and those photographs connecting her to that psychic energy, which she writes the story of that person whose energy is still in the earth, and they bring that energy forth to transform a condition. That's what an artist's role is, to serve the psyche, to heal the psyche. This is why when James Browne said, ooh, ow, I feel all right, this very thing he got from the church. Because when those sisters and brothers lean back and start humming, just that stretching of language, that manipulation of energy. Part of the reason Black people, in whatever dome context they were rolling, they had been shaped in the church. So in the secular world, you had to come with the same energy and power that church had articulated and polished for what you have to compete with. Now, that's why art that Black people made is so unique in the world that no matter where you are, no matter what your level of psychosis, and the level is deep, you cannot stand up in the force of that energy. And that's why everybody in the world, I travel around the world, and everywhere I go, I hear them rhythms. I don't, why? Why, how come? Black people didn't kill a person to do this. They didn't stab anybody. They didn't create a bomb and destroyed them. They didn't do anything. They just out of their heart gave what misery caused, and they created an antidote to psychosis. Not for anybody else, for them. and because they were so ancient in it, so powerful in it, everybody in the world could use it. And that's why no matter what century you're in, Black people, their music, their forces culturally. And I want to say here, Tushaka, as you already know and as you've pointed out, culture is a high form of intelligence. High form of intelligence, because once your bones are out of here, your intelligence remains. It's your intelligence that places you in the world. What you remember of your own ancestors is the intelligence of their presence. you and the arts try to step into that territory. Now, I just want to see if I can. I don't know if you can see my screen here, Tushaka.
I'll put it up right now. There you go. We can see it. And you
Okay.
should be able to punch for each one.
Okay. So this lecture that I'm sorry, this presentation. I don't want to see it as a lecture, but this presentation is really connected to this idea of the Atlantic. And I say Atlantic because this echoes Malcolm's statement that I heard in, I think, 1963 or 1962 when I was 13 or so, 14. And it haunted me just like the image that I'm going to show you next, which is this image. I was in a bookstore, and it was Ray Richardson's bookstore that used to be on 11th Street, Leavenworth, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I went into that bookstore and I saw Black men and women sitting in chairs talking about books. Talking about books, and I was fascinated that here these Black folks talking about books, about ideas. Like Blacks who be my uncles and stuff slamming dominoes on the table. And they were hot in these books. And I didn't know books could do that to you. I didn't know that behind those words were deep meaning. And among those books, I saw a book that had this man in it. And I looked at this image and I was stunned. I was overwhelmed because as I looked at him, unconscious but developing consciousness, young adolescent, looking at this Black man. And on the other page was a Black man standing erect with iron coming out of his head, out of his neck. And these Black people were called slaves. Now, I had heard about slavery. I knew slavery because I went back to Arkansas every year. My parents went back to Arkansas and took their children. But this time, I saw this thing on this brother's back, and I tried to figure out what those keloid patterns were. Now, of course, I didn't know they were keloid. I just looked at him and I studied him very closely. I bought the book. I took it home. And for a couple of years, I was just had this book, and every now and then I would go back to it. And I was wondering why I keep going back to this book. Why I keep looking at this dude and the dude with this stuff on his head. And then I was paying attention. And as I started learning how to draw more proficiently, I started drawing pictures of him. And then I started really studying him. And as I started to matriculate through high school, and I started to take summer classes in art college in Oakland at CCA, or College of Arts and Crafts, I learned how to be real observant. And Learning how to draw is about learning how to observe. Learning how to make art is learning to pay attention. And it teaches you your first job is to understand what are you looking at? Why is this form, which is called a mass?
Yeah, Dewey,
Yeah.
Dewey is doing fine. He's doing fine.
I'm sorry.
Dewey, are you able to advance your picture on the slave man? Do you have that picture?
Yeah, I did.
We
You
don't
can't
see
see
it.
it?
What we see is the post-Atlantic picture.
No, I'm looking at this. I'm right now. I have the image up that I'm talking about.
So he's seeing it, but we're not seeing it. So what does he have to do?
Ah, okay.
Okay. He's coming in to help you out.
Okay. I don't know why, you know.
That's okay.
All right. I'll try to speed up here. And I'm when he gets in.
Yeah, he's looking right now. So if you want to keep talking, you know.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just say that the image you will see as soon as we're able to bring it up is an image of a African American who was enslaved in the 19th century, and he was a resistor of high measure. And remember, whenever you see a medieval instrument on a Black person's body that was enslaved and was therefore being punished for the purposes of other slaves and showing other slaves that any attempt to run away or to violate a white person would mean severe punishment. And this is a way, of course, that we know even today is used to force people to comply and to let not the person who has already decided that they are going to resist, not that person, because that person has their head and they are taking pleasure in using them as an example to keep others down. So the whole point of power is to psychically not have to assert power by putting fear into people. And it is through learning that these are tactics that you come to understand how to deal with them. And this is, again, echoing my listening to Malcolm. Now, I will say that I was mostly connected at that time to Martin Luther King. And that's why I was going to marches around the city in order to follow that prescription, which was extremely useful and in some ways revolutionary. But Malcolm, and I'm doing this until you can see this the image, and I think Malcolm is appropriate because Malcolm, I think, is significant to the to Black consciousness, which, as I was matriculating as a teenager, was an essential revelation. And and helped to shape a whole generation. And my art, the work that I make is in deep part, as many of my colleagues all over the world, Malcolm has been resonant to a certain approach to art. 1 minute. Hello? I'm sorry. Let me put this air mode. So, is he on yet? He's not been able to get in. Tushaka. Uh-oh. Something is going on with the sound. Man, what is going on there?
Baba.
Hello?
Yeah, now I can hear you, Dewey. The problem is your slides are not moving other than the post-Atlantic.
Okay. So you can't see this.
I can see post-Atlantic.
Okay. Then
whatever.
Then what I think is that something is happening in relationship to this particular document. It must be that.
You hear me? Go ahead.
It must be that I'm not. You're not synced with the window that operates my my keynote, and I think that's.
I can hear him now because I put the post-Atlantic up. So what can you do to get him so that he can start clicking other slides that show? I can hear him now because the post-Atlantic slide is up. So when he talks, people can hear him.
Well, I'm very sorry for this technical glitch.
Keep on talking, Dewey. Dewey, keep on talking.
Okay. Well, as I was saying about the importance of Malcolm and the importance of images, because images linger with you, and they linger with you in ways that you're not aware of, even as you proceed through life, and they keep coming back. And this particular image that you hopefully will see soon had a profound effect on my work, because it served to illuminate some of the things that I was studying during my educational matriculation, and at the same time, the reading I was doing outside of that matriculation, because of course, no school in the 1960s or 50s or all the way up until the 70s before the Black Studies departments that sort of spearheaded all of the succeeding departments. Ethnic studies all arose out of the argument for Black historical agency in colleges, just as the student desire for freedom of speech uh, uh, came out of the civil rights movement that was taking place in the South. These ways of shaping thought and the way human beings um, could negotiate their environments at a time when change was absolutely imminent. And that change was not only the physical change that was so important that Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement of that era was providing an opportunity for Black space to be available. And when I say Black space, that you could move freely through a society shaped in the psychosis of separation. And by that, I mean separating you on the basis of race and class. And this, of course, the civil rights movement heroically uh, uh, opened a pathway. But the physical space is essential for you to have mobility. But it's the psychic space that makes you a whole person. It's the psychic space, the space between your ears, that space that Sun Ra illuminated so profoundly in his musical journey. That space is knowing who you are in that thing between your two ears. That once you understand that, the world is another kind of entity that you can have agency in, even when you don't have much. And that's the power of how knowledge of self and belief in self, meaning your cultural reality in the world, uh, is so important. And that's the revolution, the real revolution that set us on a course of self-discovery in the 1960s. It's not that this hadn't happened earlier, and of course it did, but it was always wrapped, as in the Harmon Foundation, which is a foundation designed to of white philanthropy to provide money to Blacks to make the kind of art that interested whites. And Blacks had to make art that could speak to their own interest in a kind of clandestine way, a kind of blues aesthetic that said it was one thing, operated as if it were one thing, but really was about something else. Therefore, the creative people could get money. But what that did is that also reinforced a particular stereotype. But the 60s was about blasting all that out. That was about 30 years after the Harlem Renaissance. But this is, again, why the creative arts are so important in the shaping of identity and understanding of who you are. And it's the deep hope of those people who are creative to have the liberation and the capacity to make art that not only serves a specific context, but art that evokes. And because it's in the art that evokes and to some degree provokes that change, which is the operative context, begins to take place. And hopefully I can illuminate in the showing of how I got personally to a place where I could make this dialogue in the artwork that I was interested in, and in the politics that are so essential in life. You know, I came up at a time when in the arts, when the idea of art for its own sake was pervasive in the Western art world. That art was apart, separated from the impacts of cultural forces. That any great art was art that floated above the society, that looked at the society obliquely, and that it was not a mimetic reflection of the society. And by mimetic, I just simply mean realistic image of what was before you, that art was a higher calling. And as a higher calling, it lived in the field of esoterica. Now, I want to be clear that I was never opposed to esoterica. I, in my own work, am very much interested in esoterica, and part of the reason for that kind of subtlety was, in fact, my study of African philosophical understanding of the universe. And it was through that process that I began to develop my work, as you hopefully will see, where it was broad enough to encapsulate the kind of abstraction that was very important to the African aesthetic sensibility. Now, I want to illuminate what I mean by abstraction, and I'll do that in part when I show the slides, but the idea of abstraction.
Wait to get to the slide.
Yes.
Go ahead. Keep going, Dewey.
Oh, okay. The idea of abstraction is not what has often been the primary way of understanding in the arts, that abstraction is disconnected from meaning. African art, which is the home of abstraction, and by that I mean abstract thought, which is based on a particular clarity of thought within systems of thought, and And therefore, the idea of abstract art was not foreign to African thinking. In fact, as I hope to illuminate just by showing you in African form how important some of these thoughts are expressed through objects. And to get back to the image of that enslaved person, the way the body and he shaped his body, the way he articulated his form is essential to a particular kind of communication. And that communication is oblique in its forwardness, but it is absolutely central in its structural understanding. For example, if I take this sculpture that you see here, this piece from the Dogon, and you look at it, the first thing you see is its verticality, its up and downness. And its up and downness is important because it is a connection between the heavens and the earth. So that's its first expression, that it is in the world. Now, its articulation, if you look at it closely, when you look at it from the side, it's just off the axes. Now you see that this is the axis is straight up and down, but it has shifted, which means motion in time. Motion in time and space. So its very presence indicates and articulates that this is not a static form. Just like the planet it's on, the planet is tilted on its axes, and that's what makes it rotate. And a life force, not something dead, something alive, articulates itself in relationship to that axis. And that axis creates motion. That's change. So the object is in a perpetual state of motion in time, just like us. And therefore, no matter how you turn it, it is operating in time and space as a reflection of the life force that you live in dynamically. Now, the other aspect of it, and this is very important, and this is the abstract subtlety, is that when you look at it, you see a face here. And in the Dogon, this right here, this shaping of the cranial, this is like among the Yoruba, the Ori, the consciousness, the head. This is an expression of that. Now, the symbolic, the thing that's inside the outside, is when you look at it more closely, and I'll try to help you see that, is that what you see is a face. These openings create another invisible face until it's visible. And then when it's visible, you don't forget it. That's a transformation. That's a change in time and space. That's another level of consciousness. And that is what the African mind is after. And that's why it doesn't look like a person. See, it doesn't look like a specific individual captured in a specific moment. Because if it did, it wouldn't be something which can reach into time and space. It's something that is static, like a photograph, which is okay. Now that's at a different stage in my presentation. Okay, if you can come up more, yeah, you have to go up more to post Atlantic again. This is going down. You have to go up. There we go. Go one down from there. No, this is, I think you have an older one that I sent you. That's the PDF. That's not my page. I think that's your page. Okay, I don't want to take people's time up with trying to find my original. I'll just go with what you have on the screen. And will you be moving them, or what you're seeing as we go through these are images over time that I've been working on, but they're out of sequence. So it's difficult to understand how we got to this place. Most of the work can you push that up to the top, that icon on the right there yeah, make it go all the way back up, or whatever you need to do to get it back up to the beginning. Okay. Now, I think you have control of this and I don't. I'm going to touch it and okay, you can't see that. I think you're using the one that I sent you that is turned into a PDF. Okay. Let me just, if you can manipulate these images, I will just talk about them so that we can go forward and stop boring people here. Okay, so with this image, what you're seeing is an image. Maybe now I can I don't know if I can take over here. I don't. But anyway, you can continue to manipulate these. In 1993, I went to Europe for the first time, and prior to that, I had spent most of my time in Mexico and Haiti and the Caribbean and South America. But so when I was younger, I didn't want to go to Europe, and then when I was older, I got an opportunity to go to Europe to a conference, and I went. And a friend of mine, another artist, a great artist, Raymond Saunders, took me up along with his dealer to Amsterdam. And while I was in Amsterdam, I came in contact with the tulip fields. There's a great park of tulips called the Keukenhof Gardens. And those gardens are full of thousands and thousands of varieties of tulips. And I went there very early in the morning. We were on our way to the Van Gogh Museum in Holland. And I was able to, Shaka, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I don't
Yes,
think.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the Kuchenhof Gardens presented all these flowers, and I was so moved by these flowers until they lingered in my head. And when I got back to Paris, which is where I was during this period, I started making images in these sketchbooks. And what you see here are some of those images. Now, when I saw the tulips, I saw these beautiful array, but I did not see them as flowers. I saw them as history. That is, the tulip trade in the 15th, 16th century were coveted and very important flowers. And they were worth thousands and thousands of dollars. In fact, some tulips were so expensive until they were the equivalent of enough money to buy a house. That's what fueled something called tulip mania. I won't go into its entire history, but it had an effect on me because that's what I was thinking about. The trade in tulips, the manipulation of tulips. And as I was looking at these tulips, I was thinking of how Black people have moved through society and the world, and how Black people, through this slave trading framework, had become the instruments of capitalism, just as these objects had become instruments of capitalism. Um, the field of science, particularly the science, botany, and other things, to investigate the biology of art was I'm sorry of the genetic.
Problem is he's talking and it's hard for him to do that.
The genetic field was manipulated in order to make various variety of flowers, and so it's within those varieties that I saw a similarity in how Blacks
Finish with that one.
were bred in order to take on different qualities, of which I'm a product. And so I thought, okay, I want to explore this flower. And so I started to use and really follow um, uh, the tulip and try to investigate it in order to make out of it art from it. And these, I made a series of sketchbooks, of which you can see one right here. Excuse me, could we go to the next slide? Can you push it?
Next slide.
And could you go to the one after this?
Go to the one after that.
And so I started to study this tulip. And as you can see, I studied it and began to explore it, not only with liquid, but with three-dimensional materials. So I started creating these sculptural forms. Now, what inspiration that led me to this was both this idea of defiance, which again, that figure that I showed, that I was hoping to show you, articulated this Black man with his arm open to provide a void, and his back was beat because every time he ran away, he got beat more and more, and pretty soon the keloids on his back welted up to a cacophony of forms, which indicates he was what was called a runaway. And they used him as an example. But what he really became an example of is not a slave, but a defiant, unrelenting fighter for his freedom. And Denzel Washington used him as an example when he played in Glory and revealed his back with all those welts on it. That came from that image. And Denzel translated that image in ways that undoubtedly did for him what it did for me. And that's how he brought into being and embodied this figure in the film Glory. He brought him to life. And that was the most important scene in that otherwise okay movie. Now, this image, as you can see, the Dogon, and this looks like Tommy Smith with his fist in the air. Now, this Dogon figure is called a Nomo, and this Nomo is articulated in that positioning in relationship to that point that I made about this orientation between heaven and earth, and the specificity of this figure I won't go into right now, because to illuminate the subtleties and depth of the meaning of this image would take longer than I have right now as I move through. But know that it was part of the inspiration for this object that you see on the left, which is the tulip piece that I made. Could you go to the next slide?
Go to the next slide.
Oh, wonderful. He went that image you could set in there if you could, because he's bringing that image into the form. There he is.
Yeah,
there it is. Wonderfully. Now let me just indicate to you that you see the keloiding on the back. For me, that was him communicating like that Nomo figure. Now the Nomo figure has his own set of meanings, but those meanings are available to those who can see it. Now the thing, and who know. Now, when you look at this individual, you have to pay very close attention, because he didn't open his arm up like that for nothing. He's turned his back so that you could see those welts. But at the same time, he opened that space. Now, after studying this for years, I began to understand what I believe was his subtext. And that is that inside of that portal, and I should just say that I've done a great deal of work based on this figure. And this figure, the thing that was so important to me was this figure's use of the void. Because the void is a space of potentiality. That's part of what I was saying when I was showing you this. This area of his body, this opening, this void, requires something to get into that transformative space. That in this gestural image, that roadmap, and I see it as that because he is telling you something. And the something he is telling you is that your role in this psychosis is resistance. No matter what, no matter under what conditions, any conditions, that your role is to be free. But you have to sacrifice. And if your sacrifice, and you are serious about sacrifice, what is available to you is what is in this void, which is your transformation. That's why in that drawing, in that sculpture I made, voids. In all of the work that I'm going to show you, except some, there are voids. That's because he taught me the African understanding of the use of voids. The universe is a void. And in those voids, everything, potentiality is present. Now, if you could go to the next slide in that group, just after him. This is another of those images that I started to deal with, which has to do with the way in which consciousness emerges, that no matter what the condition, when you know who you are, you can transform, and we have outside of the psychosis. We are in a state of psychosis right now, being projected back onto us. It is not new. We have never been inside this structure without this dynamic rupture in the universe, in our universe. It is part of the necessity to clean up the evil which is present always in the universe. Evil, and by evil, I don't mean that the universe is evil. I mean that our reaction and shaping of things, human beings shaping of things inside of certain systems, that's evil. And so this image is trying to understand, no matter what's wrapped around your neck, your spiritual understanding and your consciousness can deal with whatever subjective problems are in front of you, because our ancestors are echoing all through our life, and therefore they will help to guide us. And so it's through this attempt to take those shackles, those medieval torture instruments, and twist them, reconstitute them, because that psychosis hasn't gone anywhere. That evil shaping is not gone anywhere. You simply got the clarity to put it back in its evil space. And therefore, you're going to have to deal with it over and over again. It's just every time you transform, learn its psychoses, and shape a condition to exit them from your life. And that is what this consciousness form is trying to engage. And those shackles are simply transformed in form. Could you go to the next one?
Can you go to the next one?
Now, in African cosmology, this object on the right, I'm sorry, is called a Lukasa board. It's an time instrument. It's also an instrument of spiritual geography. And each of those instruments that are pounded into the surface of this form, which is a cosmic female agent. It's the female energy in the universe, or that particular energy and rhythm is expressed in that form that carries verticality, that carries horizontality, and that carries expansion in curvilineal form, united in one form. So this kind of knowledge helps to empower this form. And I'm using this as a cosmogram for orienting how the universe, called upon by a priest to bring those forces of change down into the reality of our own micro condition. And this often happens through a series of rituals which open that space and bring into being the alignment necessary to produce the proper conditions of change so that you can go through your life force. Now, it can be musical. It can be any kind of form that changes the energy dynamic. And therefore, in this case, I was using the form of symbolically the tulip, because the tulip exists under constrained, difficult circumstances, and it pushes through, even though it might be 12 degrees outside. This beautiful flower grows under those very difficult conditions, and it opens into extraordinary beauty outside of those frigid conditions that it is operating in. And so it's in that context that this image emerges. Can we go forward?
Go to the next one.
Now, here I'm trying to create a relationship between those tulips and those medieval forms. And remember that those medieval forms are really systems. And what I'm doing is using these Western systems, which have been designed to serve a few, never the whole, always the isolated few. And therefore, those systems operate to reinforce the power dynamic of a elite force. And so they, in my paintings, represent these systems, which we live in and experience, even though we don't know they're wrapped around our neck. And so I'm using them, but always twisting and turning them, never permitting them to use the rigidity or maintain the rigidity that they were designed to do, because the force of Black presence will bend them. And by Black presence, I mean Black consciousness, that you know who you are. And these individuals, like those brothers wrapped in those slave forms, slave collars, and them sisters wrapped in them slave collars for their resistance. Because remember, if they got a collar on them, that's because they resist. The reason that brother had them keloids all over his body was because he was a true revolutionary. He never capitulated. His skin no longer meant anything because his consciousness could remove the skin. He's just an energy field. Now, that's what these brothers are. These not brothers, but entities are. Now, could you go forward?
Go to the next one.
And the next one?
Next one.
So these tulips, at this point, I'm trying to really understand and deal with tulips and how they were operating in a social dynamic. And so I'm doing it over a 10-year period. Could you go forward? Again, I'm still working through this process. I'm taking up too much time now, so I'm going to go forward. Could you go forward to the next one? Now, about 93, about 1994 or 5, 6, more like 96, I started walking and running along the pier of Oakland. And I continued to do this. And I couldn't figure out why I was continually coming down to this pier to walk. And I love the park element of it. But before they even built this new area for people to meander and have picnics, it was just a blown out field. And I used to walk even then. And I walked even when they were changing this. So I just love being around these huge, massive ships. And I was drawn to them because of the color, like the tulips. That color was extraordinary. The containers had all that color. That was very important to me. So I started going to the pier and staying around them. And after a while, I wanted to understand them more. So could you go to the next? I'm going to try to speed up here a bit. The next slide, please. What I began to see is I started painting these ships in what is called plein air. And plein air is painting outdoors from real life. And so I go to the pier, I started looking at these ships and painting them so that I could understand them. Whenever an artist is trying to understand something, they do it through observation and through real intense looking. And I'm trying to find out how I'm going to, what they are, why I want to deal with them. And so it's at that point that I started to try to, I'm going to see if, oh, no. It's at that point that I began to really understand what it was that I was really after. Could you go to the next slide? And I was visiting my son about 2000 maybe in New York, and I went up to Boston, and they had this show of Turner, William F. Turner. And Turner had painted this magnificent, great painting about a slave ship. And it's a magnificent painting, man, just extraordinary. It's not huge, it's small, but it's just packed with all kind of beautiful painting. Turner is one of the great painters in the history of the medium. Just like this other painter that you see in the upper right, whose name was William Pinker Ryder. And Ryder was also a great painter. And these are static spiritual paintings as much as they are paintings about misery. And Turner really painted this magnificent painting. And I saw it and I knew that I needed to really understand what shipping was and why shipping was so important in human history. Could you go to the next slide? And I started kept drawing these paintings, and I matched them with some of the underlying consequences of commerce and its effect on the environment. And that started to lead me to a better understanding of, yeah, you go forward, please. And I started thinking how I could express that. And so I made many, many images of container ships. Could you go forward? And I started making them into three-dimensional things, making dioramas. Could you go forward? I started expressing them abstractly, but really trying to understand their relationship to commerce and their relationship to the arts. And what you see on the left is a engagement of the artistic element, which was related to the larger art world. Could you go to the next one? And then I came upon the form. And I started making these paintings of container ships as they encounter mishaps, because they represent an economic system. At the time, there was a great deal of talk about free market economics. I'd lived through the Reagan administration, which argued that the only way of the modern world was to reassert the importance of the market, and that the problem for America was government and government overreach, and therefore freeing the open market was the only way forward. And he was paraphrasing a economist by the name of Milton Friedman, who was a student of Hayek, who developed a free market theory for how to make money and economic systems become more efficient and more economically prosperous for those shareholders in business. And this was all happening in the 1960s and 70s, when the world was exploding in change. And not chief, but one of the justices on the Supreme Court named Powell wrote a letter to the business corporate classes, explaining that if you don't start using government to proselytize your free market systems, these young kids that are growing up destroying these colleges are going to be more susceptible to socialistic control. And therefore, you better start working to assist those of us who are trying to get government out of the hands and off the backs of corporate America. And this set into motion the world that we are being engulfed in right now. And this became important to me because in the 80s, I could feel this economic framework that was shaping the environment around me, and why Ronald Reagan was able, like Nixon, to use George Wallace innuendo tactics, using language that had double meaning in order to convince Americans. He couldn't say black people destroyed the planet. So he said law and order is what we need, which meant black people. He said welfare queens are stealing your money, which meant black women. So these frameworks I had to deal with some kind of way in my work. And it became looking at the very economic systems that were being shaped through an efficiency model to recast colonialism. That is a free market enterprise that was now being used to control those colonies that had blown them out of the water, could now be recolonized through an economic system. Because even though they had freedom of space, they didn't have, and they wouldn't have, freedom of economics. So the world previous subjects would have to be made re-subjectized in economy, and their economies would be beholden to Western economic systems. Could you go forward? So I started using the container and the contents, just as these ships went across the oceans in the 15th century to reinforce economic development. They used black bodies and other bodies to reinforce an economic system to serve a few. The Enlightenment framework, which would emerge, would be designed to serve a few, as George Washington and Jefferson and all of them who made a free market enterprise through the use of double language. And in that double language, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The equal was in itself a absolute lie. And so in that way, I wanted to find the means to express this process without beating somebody over the head with an obvious argument for it, because it's not what is overt in front of your face. It's what's implied. It's what is inside the oblique. And could you go to the next slide? And here are these containers constantly emptying out into the ocean. The piece on the left, the painting on the left, like that image that Turner painted, I needed to find a form that could contain the kind of power that Turner articulated, because Turner used the sky symbolically. But once somebody as great as Turner opens a door and uses it, you can't use that same lick anymore, because he mastered the lick. He made the lick so great that any reference to it is going to come right back to him. So therefore, I wasn't interested in mimicking the great Turner. I was interested in finding a framework that could speak in the language of the blues, which would be full of double entendre. And that meant that I had to find an image that could both speak directly to what my interests were, but also could indicate the sources of this kind of ideology. So in religion, because remember, America's religion is commerce. America's religion is money. Like every time they say God, they mean money. And every time they say money, they mean economic systems that provide more money. And the purpose is to maintain power for a few people, not everybody. Some of that money can, like those containers, flow out, and some will be contained in the system that justifies the fact that a few can get richer. The idea, for example, that an individual could be a billionaire is obscene. It's obscene. Now, so I put in the water hidden images. Like if you look at that water says Hayek, the developer of the idea and the great teacher of free market capitalism. And Black bodies were a part of that system. And the other is Keynes. Now, we grew up under a Keynesian system of governance that got us out, economic governance, that got us out of the Depression, created the New Deal and all that. That was Roosevelt setting up an economic system that could help share the wealth in order to make more wealth for the wealthy, the few. But they couldn't, they hated that because Roosevelt set into that framework something that American wealthy hated and never wanted to do, which is to pay taxes, because they didn't have to pay taxes. No matter how much wealth they got, they didn't have to pay taxes. So they could get around paying taxes. But he said, no, in order to make more money, fool, you share some of this wealth. That racist named Ford understood that. So he paid his people more money to build cars so that they could buy cars. But, you know, greed, particularly American greed and Western greed, is never enough. This is the bestial aspects of it. And I'm not calling people beasts. I don't believe in white people are beasts or any of that. But they're bestial systems, and they get made by a few people and make you believe that that's the only system in the universe that can serve you. And that's what Roosevelt, no matter what his context, he was very wealthy, but he understood that to get out of this one, we needed to share. And he went to England and got an Englishman named Keynes to help him figure out how to deal with getting us out of the Depression and making prosperity a gospel. And it became more prosperous. And we lived under that system, and that system continued until our present moment. This is why the past is always in the present. And finally, those people who fought, and this is another thing, time. Time is relative. For us, the quicker the better. But in reality, time don't give a damn. So when Roosevelt put that system into place called the New Deal, the wealthiest among us went to war to try to destroy that deal from that day forward. And finally, they found the element, the distraction society that we live in, to help find the very kraken that they loosened on the world that is changing it back to what it used to be. So the very people who were liberated voted themselves into this same problem all over again because they believe in distraction. So let me spend the last few minutes on this particular element, and I'm going to try to move forward. Is the reason I use this gold leaf on this painting is because through all human history, when gold was discovered, its power of permanence and its reflective capacity helped it to become the instrument that was connected with God. Now, first, because it reflected God, the light. And when it reflected God, and anytime you polished it, it reflected more. It became a spiritual object because it reflected the omnipotence that you were blessed with every day. And therefore, that material, because of its property, had many properties. And one of its properties is distraction. Because it's shiny, you pay attention. And the wealthy use it in order to make you pay attention. They make you look over here while they taking whatever's in your pocket over here. And the shinier they make it, the better. And that's why this sky and this water is full of reflective material because of its distractive property. But it also has another property, which is its allegiance to omnipotence. They worship gold. The image looks like bullion. That's containers. The rupture in the sea, in the ocean, is the rupture that it causes in the world. So here in this image are all the forms that I needed to really make a point while distracting you with the ship. But if you pay attention, like this form, you can see the face inside the distraction of the object, because this is the point. What's in that void? That's the point. Now, that gave me what I needed to sort of open this doorway into my exploration. And could you go to the next slide? And the effects of these forms move through time, and they create distractions that lead to consequences. cause and effect. And the contents of this history spills out all over the accident of time. Could you go to the next form? Next. Above the water, that's the case. And below the water is something altogether different. And it's below the water that the bodies you don't see, the material reality, the constant attempt to distraction is there, emptied out on the ocean floor. And that's why I had to draw into this process what was above and what was below. And this shiny material, this silver, acts just like my description of that, which is the other aspect of power and commerce, and that's the silver. Now, these forms have esoteric meaning in all cultures because they serve a profound purpose. I don't have time to go into it, but could you go to the next slide? So then, again, in Marcus Bookstore, this time years later, a middle-aged man runs into this object in a book on slavery. And the images you see right now have a dual purpose. They come from the continent. They are objects that are worn by African dancers who are bringing transformative powers into the local domain by using these adornments on their body. And they shake. So these are wrist elements, ankle rail elements. They open up and you close them. And then you move and they have pebbles in them. And so they make noise rhythmically. And so as the body moves in direction, it creates vibrations. And those vibrations operate sonically. And what attracted me to this when I saw it in the 90s was its proximity, its shape looked like a tulip. And then as I looked at it more closely, just like the tulip, it looked like a human body. And it looked like I was looking down on a human body floating in space. And because African art trained me not to look at the object, but look at the space that the object occupies. And now I saw its spiritual dimension, just like when I saw that opening in that arm, because I've been trained to read the subtext through the text. And so immediately I saw a form that wouldn't let me go because it had this ability to shapeshift. First it's an object, then it's a body, then it's an instrument, then it's got quadruple meaning, just like the paintings I'm starting to explore. And so I started really investigating this form. Could we go forward? And so I started looking at it, and all of these forms for me are time machines, time vessels. All of them, because I'm seeing them in relationship to time, which is what they are. That object I just showed you is a time object. The movement of the body is operating to create a spiritual dimension sonically, and therefore is using sign signature, time signature based on rhythms, which are mathematics, which are space forms, vibratory forms. And when those vibrations get in the world, they're moving constantly through the universe. And that means time. Because for me, the reason those containers were so important is because they produce shadows. And shadows mean time. And those containers, the ridges on them create shadows. And those shadows are time-based, and they create a rhythm. This form, I started to explore based on my relationship to time, what animated me in the world. Could we go to the next one? So I started to abstract them. And see, for me, abstraction and mimeticism are one thing, because in the African consciousness, this is one thing. See, this ain't a bunch of things separated. They're one thing. It's composed of many different elements: a head, a body, a form, an outer form, an inner form, which is that void again. And so I started following it. And it made these abstractions. Now, why abstractions? Because it's the highest level of consciousness. Africans do abstraction all day long. Why? Because they don't have to affirm themselves as Black people. Why would an African in their own soup? So when they make form, they ain't trying to make a Black art piece. This ain't no Black art piece. They're not confused with having had their culture ripped from them, so they're in a constant state of trying to look at something that look like them. No, they're interested in ideas. Ideas. And those ideas are what produce this. See, and those ideas are meant to shift reality in time and space. And they serve a purpose at the time that they are needed. And therefore, it's abstract, because you can see this, but this don't look like Dewey Crumpler. This belonged to Dewey Crumpler, but you can't see my face. It looked just like me. No, because that's a death. That just means I done captured myself, and that's cool. But what is he doing? He's making an archetype through time and space. It ain't old, it ain't new. It's a way of being, a way in the universe. No matter what time in the universe you come or go, these elements are always present, which is your consciousness. So abstraction is another dimension of consciousness. And so whether it looks like me in a so-called modern mimetic world, a Western world that favors stopping in motion and time, Hellenistically capturing Zeus right now, capturing Eusephanes, whoever her name is. So that right there, that's a stop clock. No, the blood is interested in the clock, time. Not a picture of time in that moment, but time. So abstraction is all day bloods, because they ain't trying to be what white people said they weren't, which is human beings. They know they're human beings. So they don't have to get angry at black people who make abstract art, which we had to argue about all through the 60s and 70s, because I'm Dewey Crumpler. Whatever I make, you understand? Whatever I make, because I'm making me. Can we go to the next one? So I started following this. And then the music. Music has never not been with me. And this says certain blacks, and it came from a song I was listening to by the Chicago Art Ensemble. It says certain blacks, groove on love, groove on love. Certain blacks, dig they freedom, dig they freedom. Certain blacks, dig they wisdom. Wah! That's abstraction, but reality. And I'm trying to follow this sense of dig day freedom, because that's what that image told me. You get through this portal and you can be free. And there's no freer place to be than a maker. No freer place to be than in this studio making me. So that's why I had to follow. But just like them blisters on his body, to be free, you got to take that ass, you got to take that whooping, because life is not free. Because you got to be prepared to go to battle up in here. You can't be distracted. You can't let the shiny stuff stop you from being whole. Could you go to the next slide? I'm almost finished. I know I'm taking you. Could you go to the next one? This is still an exploration of that form, and these as well. Could you go? These all happen over a period of time. And this, is there one before this? Go before, up, go back. We're going back toward the other, toward what we just saw. No, that looks like it's going forward. No, okay, I'm sorry. Just go back to the image that you showed. Okay, now these images came as a result of those those images you just saw. Once I saw that image of that so-called slave collar, it produced these forms, which are called hoodies. Now, I've gone on so long, I'm not going to go through the whole exegesis here, but the hoodies, could you go forward, are an element of my inquiry, which are a sort of coming together of these cosmologies, these spiritual dimensions that I'm interested in. And they operate as entities. They reflect time. They go in and out of time. They feed on black holes. So whenever they need to be re-energized, they go back into the universe. And you have to understand that these cosmic forms are both as big as the universe and small as an atom. So they have no scale. They have no sexual identity. They are pure manifestations of cosmic energy, and they act as reflectors, like Eshu or any any trickster and they operate in the trickster realm because they go in and out of time, like you just saw them at the museum at MoMA. Could you go back just a second? This is the hoodies right there. This is the hoodie which have gone back in time. Now, the painting that you see on the left is a painting created by Pablo Picasso. Now, that's one of the paintings that is given the credit of having created modernism in the world, in the creative world. Modernism, which is a period in human development after the 18th century, where Isaac Newton reoriented the heavens, and out of that came a series of ideas and thoughts in the West that produced the idea ultimately of progress and a way of venerating the sciences and using reason as a way of understanding the universe and human consciousness. And the United States and France's arguments for liberty came out of this notion. So this whole idea, what we're in right now, is related to that moment. And so the arts are always connected to ideas. Anytime in history, the arts are used by culture to reinforce ideas and to present ideas into the world. And the idea of the new, which is a Western concept, it's not only Western, but the West uses this concept and connects it to Darwinian evolution, which is the notion of becoming a perpetually improved subject. That's why we made, for example, the misunderstanding that when the Supreme Court said in Brown v. Board that you could not segregate against Black people, that was it, that was final, that was progress. And just like when that led to the Voters' Rights Act, and they said that now you have the right to vote, and it is linked in law, and therefore in precedence, you cannot change it. It won't change because progress has happened. But because I had been trained to think, and because I paid attention to Malcolm as a kid, I heard Malcolm before he died say that you could stick the knife of racism into me 9 inches and pull it out 6 and say, well, that's progress. Well, for the powerful, that's progress. But for me, I still got 3 deadly inches in my chest. So don't tell me about what is progress. Progress has always meant whose progress. And so the hoodies get about the business of exposing this idea. Could you go to the next slide? The next one. the hoodies go on spiritual missions because, as I said, they are spiritual forces. And as you look very closely, you can see that inside their hoodie is the universe, because they are expressions of the universe, and they carry the universe with them. And they are, in this case, involved in the 5 levels of consciousness that they are articulating and dealing with in these rituals they produce and participate in. Could you go to the last one? Right next. And they negotiate the cosmos, and they comment on hypocrisies and on conditions, good and bad. I will only end by saying this, and I'm sorry that I've taken so long. I really appreciate whoever is still able to stay. But I'm currently working on a graphic novel with the hoodies, and they are really looking at the last 130 years or 120 or so years of American world history. And so I'm working on that graphic novel right now. Anyway, I thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to speak, and I want to thank my brother for helping me through this and clicking through these materials. And thank you, Oba, for giving me this opportunity to discuss the ideas that have been circulating and I've been investigating over the last 34 or 5 years.
This is beautiful, and don't be apologizing. First of all, we have a history for being long, as you know, but your stuff is deep. And if you look at some of the comments here, first of all, Brother Ugawa, Baba, this is so great. Do not apologize. And they can't wait for you to come up with this book. And comment, the symbolism you're giving on the hoodie is a new meaning of the widely used image of Trayvon Martin.
That's right.
Yeah. And then some other comments here. Art is used to communicate ideas to the culture.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a reflection of the culture too. You know?
That's right.
Got any comments on those?
Well, first of all, I would say thank you very much. There's both those reactions are absolutely correct. In my study of the arts, in my understanding of the political world I've lived in, as I said, that art has always been a powerful force in every culture on earth, and art has been used for extraordinary good, and art has been used for evil. And the reason is because art is a power. And because, as was stated when we first came together and over articulated, it is one of the highest expressions that humans engage in. And it's because of that power that is, right now, if I might say, that right now, the first thing Donald Trump did was to take over the art production structures in the country. He took over the Kennedy Center. He took over the National Gallery. He took over every place where art was expressing itself, and then sent through the Just Us department memos to people all around the country that if you spend one dime, even private museums and cultural places, one dime on DEI, we will sue you in the name of the very bills that Black people fought along with some courageous whites to change the historic denials of all human creative engagement. And so the arts are not casual, even though sometimes they play like they are. The arts are, as my mother used to say, heart attack serious. So, yes, the arts are no plaything, and they transform. Their purpose is, in the most powerful aspect, the capacity for transformation.
Yeah, what I really like the whole presentation, and then how you have used history, politics, economics on different levels, the 60s, the 19th century, the 20th century, and now what you're talking about transitioning into another state, and the economics and stuff that are driving this high up, and the others who are dealing with neoliberalism, and tying that into slavery and the slave trade and capitalism.
That's right.
You're showing why this form that you're in, because I note when you first started, you were into the big murals and stuff, and you may still do some of that, but it was obvious what you were saying. Like the one I have up here that you have at George Washington High School, where you're breaking the chains.
Yes.
And that's about 7 or 8 feet tall.
Yes.
And then you've moved into this symbolism that is so central to the African mind, and it's so central to the culture.
That's right.
It's evolved, it's an evolution that expresses, in your case, genius. And the way you compacted some of the stuff that some of our people are just beginning to find out about, because they don't understand neoliberalism because they can't see it. Our culture is geared for what you can see.
That's right.
But those who go deeper,
That's right.
they can bring messages to the people.
That's right.
That, there's other dimensions to what you're seeing, and you captured it. In the Yoruba culture, they have a term that in many ways gets to what you've just described, and it's in Yoruba art, and it's called Iwa Liwa.
Right.
That
Absolutely.
character is beauty.
Right. Absolutely.
But it does not mean that it's what you call perfect beauty. It does not even mean beauty in the Western sense.
That's right.
It means that when you're conveying the essence of a thing, a person, or whatever you're depicting, it can be an animal or anything, any part of the universe. Great art, real good art, captures its essence, its soul. And that's what you've been doing with this. And then pure beauty, even when it's ugly. And you and I, we talked about this before, that running through all the art forms is this idea of creating beauty out of ugliness. And you were giving the example of one of our great jazz musicians that called it what? Ugly Beautiful?
That's it. Ugly Beauty. I was just about to say that Thelonious Monk wrote a tune that when I was a kid, I first heard, I didn't understand what that meant, ugly beauty. Uh, because beauty meant one thing as I understood it, but Monk opened the world up to, first of all, you can't have beauty without ugly. And secondly, ugly and beauty, they're relative terms. And the point is that they are really the same. Sometimes you can see something that's so ugly, it's beautiful. Just like they called Monk's music ugly because they didn't hear anything like that. And then as they heard it more often and began to understand what he was doing, it became the most beautiful.
Mhm.
One time, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One time, when I was young and I was reading a lot of stuff, African philosophical thought, Buddhist thought, and I was trying to listen to some music, which was I was just getting ready to get out of high school, and I I was right next door to my godparents. There was a Buddhist temple, and I used to hear these chants, and they used to remind me of the chants that Black people did in the church. And so I started reading Buddhism because it was in the Fillmore, and where Japantown is, they live right next to the temple. So I started reading these books on Buddhism so I could understand, and I was starting to buy records by uh, Tibetan and Buddhist chants. And one day I saw a record, it said meditations. And so, and mind you, I'm a James Browne, Temptations, that's where my head is. But so I bought this record. It said meditations. And I took it home and I put it on my stereo record player that my mother had bought, which was portable for me for Christmas. And it went. I said, "But what is this?" And I took it off my record player. I went up on my backyard and I threw it in the air, and it went out on the streets and blew up. And I said, I'll never listen to anything that horrible ever again in my life. But I could never get this sound out of my head. And so about 6 months later, after hearing this sound constantly, I went over to, by this time I was in college, and I went over to the record store on Columbus, and I went over to this Coltrane section, and I bought the record again along with about 5 or 6 other Coltrane records, and I listened to this music over and over until I understood what it was, and I really worked hard to try to comprehend it. And once I got it, I bought every record that Coltrane ever made, and that led me to the blues, to Ornette Coleman, to Monk, that led me back in time as well as forward in time. So I there's nothing like getting just transformed by ugly beauty.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because when you're given the Coltrane example, when he started to move into free jazz, before he was into other forms that were more
That's right.
lyrical and stuff.
That's right.
So to the ear, because people hadn't heard this before, he's trying to break boundaries. He's an innovator. And like you know, your art is constantly going to another level. He was going to a realm like Ornette Coleman that
That's
a lot of people were not used to.
That's
So
right. That's right.
they would call that ugly.
That's
but
right.
It's really new. It's new sound.
That's right. That's right.
Coltrane was working on something because he had the courage. He was
There
an
you go.
innovator of 4 schools of thought. So
That's right.
that
That's
was
right.
that. Yeah. So and also this idea of creating beauty out of ugliness. That's not only what our musicians say, um, artists say, our scientists say, all of our cultural workers say, because we came into an ugly place.
That's
So what we had to do was bring beauty to beautify it. George Washington Carver came up with new paint, which
right.
is called Egyptian blue,
That's exactly.
for sharecroppers.
That's
So they
correct.
could have some beauty in those shacks.
There you go.
You understand?
There you go.
And with all the good things that he brought with the science,
That's right.
that was it.
That's right.
So and so this abstraction that you're using is high realm thought, and it's got many meanings. And the way you took those containers, because for me, I'm looking at it as junk in the sense that
That's right.
all that shit is stacked up.
That's right.
Greed. I
That's
mean, you know, these container ships are packing everything. I mean, you're talking about packing us on slave ships.
Come on.
Look what they've done.
That's right.
To make their wealth in the modern world. It's pure
That's right.
ugly. But what you did is you
That's
took
right.
beauty out of it, you put a form into it, and you gave meaning to it.
Yes. Yes, because the efficiency model that slavery packing blacks into those ships. See, they learned how to pack large numbers of black people into ships. And that same model is what they're doing, what opens up the whole containerism.
Right.
It's the same mindset. It's like those objects that I found in a book about slavery that was really, this is to your point, that was really used in Africa as an instrument of transformation and sonic brilliance. In this person's mind, their mind is set in a way based on those efficiency models that they're not interested in the transformative musical because they only see classical music as high music.
Right.
So therefore, when they see this, they see savagery and so and unsophistication. And so they see it in practical terms for their use. It's just like when they encountered the Chinese and they saw all those fireworks and which were used to help venerate the gods. And they immediately saw it as propulsion capacity. So they used gunpowder, what came to be known as gunpowder, to project projectiles. That's because of the way their mind worked. See, and that's what I'm saying. You know, it's just like they are using the terms that were evolved in the civil rights movement for liberation to re-enslave black people. The same words they reinterpret for their purposes, because once you control the information that people gain and you've already trained them to only see the surface of things, you can manipulate them extremely easily because you've trained them from elementary school how to pay attention to the surface of things, but never to understand the depth of things. Because when they grow old, you want to be able to manipulate them to serve the shiny stuff that you are putting in their face, so that when you say it's new, they believe it's new, even though it's the same thing in that package that was there before they even came back with that new argument. So so this is how art can open, and this is how knowledge can open. That's why when you have people like yourself who have dedicated themselves to opening the minds of fellow human beings through a lifelong teaching and a lifelong change agentry, like what you grew up in, and you couldn't take it. So you became a chief organizer in order to create change. It's that's another form of creative empowerment. And it takes work. So the main thing is you were unwilling to be comfortable alone. Not that you were not going to be comfortable, but that you alone couldn't be comfortable without also wanting to create comfort outside of yourself.
Yeah, and your point when you were opening about in the 20th century, the freedom of the mind began to emerge as a result of the anti-colonial movements,
That's right.
as a result of the movements here. And that's the same thing that affected my transformation. That's what produced Malcolm's transformation,
That's right.
because it was the circumstances of the time that gave us that opening.
That's
The
right.
defeat of Britain in World War II, the decline and fall of the West, that is in Europe,
Right.
the rise of America for 27 years, and now its rapid decline, which is what you're seeing with Trump. They're trying to put the genie back into the box. And it may be a dummy they have up there, but they've given him maximum authority to try and restore the good old days where whites have complete control. The
That's
problem is that the numbers have shifted, number
There
one.
you go.
Demographics
That's you
are
go.
working against you. You no longer want to have children. And even if you did, we're overwhelming you, not only in numbers, but in culture. And so now their mechanism is executive authority.
That's right.
Their mechanism is dictatorship.
Yes, there you go.
Those of us who are on the plantation don't see it. The majority of our people do. That's reflected in elections. That's
right.
reflected in how we move.
That's right.
That's reflected in Black Lives Matter and the movement, Trayvon Martin and the others who dislodged Trump in 2020.
That's right.
That was that motion that people could see that. But now, due to stealing the election,
That's exactly
voter
correct.
fraud,
That's
changing the algorithms on the internet,
there you go.
hitting a weak link among Blacks, those who have been hardest hit, some young Blacks, but 85% of our people stayed straight.
That's right.
Some Latinos who want to be white, but a majority of them voted against Trump.
That's right.
Most of us are not aware of that. So they're going up against a high tide of history. And right now, they're using everything they can to hold it back. But it's like holding back the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean.
There you go.
And so your analysis of
There you go.
Hayek and the scam game that
That's
Trump
right.
never heard of. I bet you if you ask him who Hayek was.
No, of course, of course.
But he's the manifestation
That's right.
of that in its worst form of Aryan culture,
That's
of total lord and master control. And that's the thing. So, but they got a dummy in charge, but people around him who have given him an agenda.
They're not dummies.
Part of what you're saying here is this culture that we've created here is so deep. It can carry us through anything.
That's
and
right.
It already has.
That's right.
This is just another challenge.
There you go.
You're proof, along with a whole lot of other
There you go.
weights, lightweights, and middleweights.
There you go.
All contending
There you go.
to higher levels. That
There
what
you go.
got to put on the table will be beauty, not madness.
There you go.
Truth, not lies.
Well, there it is.
What you laid out here is, normally the term, this is a term that the Yorubas describe for God, and none of us, we're all gods within ourselves. But
Yes.
I'd say for what you've laid out here and what many of our creative people have developed is superlative beauty.
Right on.
Superlative wisdom.
There you go.
So do not, for those of you that was talking about, they appropriate our culture and they use it and everything else. Yeah, of course, they built their wealth on it. But the fact is also, we've learned how to take this culture and also profit from it for a change.
That's right.
The key point is this culture is the motivation force for freedom.
That's exactly.
For us and for the world.
That's exactly.
These models we got, it's good for us and it's good for everybody else.
There you go.
That's the beauty. I like the way you started with the sound.
There you go.
Those vibrational sounds coming out of the Black church. And that's that spiritual blues sound that isn't sad, it isn't joyful. It's both mixed together. Joy and sorrow, but always the joy transcending the sorrow. It's that
right. That's right.
That
the blues. That's it.
From Africa.
That's it.
That makes us pick people up wherever they are. And that sound is in the voice of Malcolm. I saw somebody say the civil rights movement was a mistake. First of all, we didn't call it a civil rights movement. We called it a Black freedom movement.
That's
mistake my behind, unless you think staying on the plantation was a good thing. You don't know what you're talking about, because those Southern Blacks went up against the greatest odds and they reversed the Hayes-Tilden Compromise of 1876 and buried it in the ground, restored voting rights, and ended formal apartheid. Now they're trying to bring it back, but here's the deal. They can't put that back in the box the way they did before.
No.
The world has changed.
That's exactly.
They're in decline.
That's exactly.
They don't have the power to do it.
That's exactly.
We have to have the power to stand, because you made a comment when we were talking, when I called you about 3 weeks ago, and you made the comment is, one thing about us is we stand together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our greatest strength in our culture. We're the most unified bloc in this country, but we don't often realize the grassroots does. But the intellectuals, some of them have missed it. Some in the grassroots too. But the grassroots usually understands it because they're the ones that stand behind whatever they're going to do. And generally what they do, because that's who woke me up, everyday Black folks who didn't know 2 cents about Africa, but were more African than many Africans.
Of course.
You know what I mean? They woke me up. And I've always said, when the masses move, I'm with the masses because the masses are generally right. And so right now, we've got some moves we have to make. And everybody who is, watching shows on the internet. Hopefully it's the AfroNet or the InfoNet, not the IgnoNet, except to monitor it, as some people I know do, to monitor fools who are talking about we're foundational Americans, a bunch of bull. That carries no weight on the streets. Ain't nobody heard that on the streets. So what we have to do is continue on this path. And whatever you're doing, those of you that watch this, if you're an artist like Dewey Crumpler, if you're a poet, if you're into science or math, if you're into business, you're a family person, a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, you have to get involved in something that's building power in your community, involved in something, because what you're dealing with is a counter power there that is going to be overcome. And it's going to be overcome through power today and tomorrow. So, Dewey, I know your daddy looks down on you and your mother from heaven, and I know they're proud of you.
Brother.
And coming from a place like Arkansas, where they could keep Black people wearing warm jackets in the summer. And certain Black belt areas of Arkansas never dared to vote, even until recently. And they produced a monstrosity like Bill Clinton.
That's right.
That knew enough about Black people to really confuse some.
That's exactly
on their side.
Exactly.
One of the worst things that's ever happened.
Exactly.
Black folks was Bill Clinton, but he knew
in every sense of the word.
You better believe it.
Let me just say, Tushaka, I have to go and pick my son up from the airport, but I will say this: it's been a pleasure. I appreciate very much you and your audience sticking in there, and I hope everybody understands that this is difficult times, but it's also the best of times, because your point is so well made about how yesterday, whatever it was, certainly can't be repeated in the same way now. That we have one of the most important tools that was used before through a gatekeeping structure that did not permit people to speak. There are too many avenues for communications for this attempt to recapture the past and project it into the present for it to win. It's impossible. There is truly a new mind in the world, and Black people had everything to do with creating it. And we will have everything to do with absolutely changing it and continuing to change it. So I am very really joyful with some understanding. I'm more like what you just described, realistic but deeply hopeful, and I feel good about it, because I know ultimately Black people and others who are clear will be ready to go at this in serious ways. So this is one of them. And I appreciate you helping me to put my stuff in the world. And thank you.
Well, I'm proud of you and what you're doing to open the eyes and put a smile on it, because you put a smile on your wife's face, that's love. You know what I mean?
Man.
Put a smile on your people's face and humanity's face.
Right.
That is love that's going all the way around. So that's
It is.
appreciated. I just want to say this final thing. We had a brother named Willie Ricks on our show about a month and a half or so ago, and he's the person that formulated the Black Power slogan. Kwame Ture told me about him. I knew about him. A beautiful brother. He right now is in Burkina Faso.
Wow.
And he's been there for a week. He met with the prime minister yesterday. He's been made an ambassador of Burkina Faso for the world.
Wonderful.
Wife, and they're both 80.
Wow.
And so he'll be on the show soon when he comes back, because he had
Great.
called to ask if he could come on. I said,
Great.
are you kidding? You know what I mean? And so that's another sign of what you're saying, Dewey, that the minds have changed. 3 countries in French, so-called French West Africa, have unified as one. Are giving full support to Africans all over the world and want their support from us.
Wonderful.
The head of the European Union said Burkina Faso and the other nations they're aligned with are a threat to the world. Translate what that means? That means that they're building power independent of France, independent of the United States. They are building power on behalf of their people. So we need to do everything we can to support
them,
young brothers who ain't playing, and young sisters who ain't playing. So that's about that. And Dewey, this is part 1. We'd like to have more of you more times, and that's what people are saying. I definitely want it, because I took so many notes on what you were saying. I said, oh man, check this out. And it's current.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. And thank brother for helping me out here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. Have a great one.
And your son.
I will indeed. I will do that immediately. As soon as I hang up, we're going to be off. So thank you so much. You have a great day, and your audience, thank them very much for hanging in there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, brother.
Goodbye.
Bye.